have Nan Hayworth here, and she is running for the Congressional seat here in the 19th District. And she's on the Republican ticket, the Independent ticket, and Conservative ticket?
Yes.
Okay, good. And we're going to talk about creativity, technology, and solutions, and hopefully we can talk about how she thinks Washington can help us going forward in our personal life and in our business life as well. And Nan, we were just talking before about you going out and talking to folks in the field, people, small business people, and you were one yourself.
Yes.
How does uncertainty figure into this? And is our government creating uncertainty with policies?
Uncertainty figures enormously into it, and that probably, if we had to identify the theme that dominates, it would be uncertainty tinged with, or significantly contributed to by a certainty that it's going to cost them more to do business in the near future, and they're just not sure in what ways, and that's part of it. The health law we've talked about, they haven't even finished writing all the provisions, as you know, of the health law in terms of how different decisions about coverage and about penalties are going to be made. But there's not just that, there's the new financial regulatory law, which itself ran 2,400 pages, which basically said we're going to establish a whole bunch of boards, wait and see, watch this space. So they don't know what's coming at them from that end. They're having trouble getting credit because of the way in which banks now, lending institutions, are sitting on their own deposits and making money off the spread, basically. The Federal Reserve's actions play into that. They don't know what their energy costs are going to be like. John Hall voted for the health law, voted for every stimulus and bailout, and voted for cap and trade. It hasn't passed the Senate, but of course we know that that's probably going to be teed up. Card check for our local businesses that are large enough to be considered for union membership. So that's another issue that could add enormously to their costs. So they've got energy costs, they've got healthcare costs, they've got a lack of credit, all sorts of ways in which they could be hit hard for simply continuing to do business. So people are cautious. They're just kind of holding tight and waiting for the next blow to come.
So, and that goes back to interest rates. The Fed policy has interest rates down as low as 0%. Like you said before, the bankers are making money doing that. Why should they invest it somewhere else when they have those margins? At the same time, individuals are not. And we've talked about this before on our show. It doesn't matter if it's negative 5%. If you don't have a job, or you don't have a job, or you're afraid you won't have one, or you're afraid you're not going to have new business as a business, you're not going to take on new obligations.
Right. This is true.
And this is out there, so you can really prime pump it as much as you can, which almost leads us to the question, what really can we do to an extent? And I was talking to a gentleman the other week, and he was what was he doing? It was a businessman right here in Warwick. He was exhausted, and I said, "Why? You look like you're on death's bed." And he said, "Because I've been here 12 hours a day." He can't afford to hire anybody else, and he can't leave his business. And I said, well, you don't want to die of a heart attack either, but he doesn't want to lose his business. And that almost has to put it into a perspective. I mean, you've had some town halls in the past yourself, and you're planning one on the 21st of September. Where tell us a little bit about that that event. You're opening up to businesses.
Yes, we have our small business task force, and that consists of a range of businessmen and women from across the district representing various key industries, and our bankers as well have attended. We had and participated. We had a forum in April in which we had construction and real estate, and our colleagues from the financial industry all weighing in on what the current situation is, and of course making predictions for the future if this federal government doesn't change course. And on September 21st, we're going to hear from them what they want Washington to know, and how timely that is in advance of this November election.
Do you have a feeling that the congressmen's halls people haven't been that responsive to those concerns? What's your perspective on that? I guess you're doing it for that reason. That must be the reason.
Absolutely. Two aspects in that regard. One is that we do hear quite consistently that our small businesses, medium-sized businesses, or employers don't feel as though they're being heard in Washington, and that includes Congressman Hall's office. And I'll get so many people saying, you know, I wrote a letter more than once. One fellow told me today I wrote a letter 8 times and didn't get answers I wanted to. A lot of it's about the health law, as you can imagine. But aside from that, his record of votes clearly indicates that this is a congressman who follows a philosophy that more government spending is better. I take the opposite philosophy, and yes, Joe, that is why I'm running. The private sector is the engine of our economy. It's the engine of our freedom. And people are so concerned this year. I've never seen it. You and I are about the same age, sir. I have never seen it. I'm 50 this year, and I've never seen it so strong that people are so concerned about the threat, not only from without our country, but from within, with what our domestic policy is doing and how our future, our children's future, our grandchildren's future, is going to be very different in ways that we will not like at all, and that represent the opposite of what America's constitutional freedoms have stood for.
Yeah, there was a huge gathering in Washington D.C. the other day. My mentor in the area of political science had always told me, when you see a lot of people, Joe, a lot of people, because most people don't go to political meetings, when you see tons of them, you should be aware that something's going on. I mean, Congress has an 11% approval rating. When you see people like that, the bell should be going off in both the Republican and the Democratic camps. And we need to be creative. I hate to be critical of both sides, but I haven't seen a lot of creativity coming out of either. Less certainly more recently with some of the Democratic proposals that are impacting negatively, I think, small business. But what was your impression of that event the other day? Is it the same?
Yes, Joe, absolutely. We need creativity and we need courage, and the energy. When you were talking about the numbers of people who have been involved, the hundreds of thousands who were at the rally on Saturday in Washington, people all around our district have said, you know, I never wrote a letter to the editor, I never went to a meeting, I've never come to a town hall. And some of us have never run for office before, like your candidate here, but I feel so passionately about it this year, and they are bringing new energy and new thoughts to this entire process. So I'm hopeful that we are going to see new creativity and new courage out of the incoming class of congressmen and women in Washington.
Sure. You know, that's one of the questions that people are going to invariably ask you. You know, you've got little experience working in government. You know, is that going to be a problem? May not be a problem.
Joe, I contend strongly it's far from a liability this year. It is an asset in this particular year. We are so ready to have men and women in office. You were talking about the lack of business people, the zero business people practically in the current president's administration. We have men and women in our Congress, many of whom are in fact career politicians. There is a preponderance of, probably a preponderance of attorneys in a lot of ways, and lawyers are great people. When you need a lawyer, you're glad to have one, but they view solutions. Again, we're talking about creativity and problem solving.
Sure.
They view solutions in a certain way. Let's write a law.
Right.
And I think the new class is going to be saying, you know what? Let's wind down some of these laws. Let's take some of these laws, or a lot of these laws, off the backs of the American people and put the same faith in them that our founders had when they wrote the Constitution.
Yeah, whether it's federal or state government, one of the things that's always driven me crazy is unfunded mandates.
Yeah.
That come from both. How do you feel about those?
Unfunded mandates, you better not ever see me vote for an unfunded mandate, number one. And those that currently exist, we have to figure out how we're going to relieve them, either with appropriate funding, which is going to mean it's going to have to be offset from somewhere else, or by repealing the law that puts the mandate on our state.
Right.
It's not right.
What about term limits? Are you in favor of term limits? I mean, we have them for the executive branch, the president, but we don't have them for Congress and Senate. And you know, when I look at creativity, I see people that have been in one place too long that have to move on to something else. What's your impression about that?
Agreed, completely. If it's right for the presidency, why would it not be right for a member of Congress? So I agree with term limits. One of my friends suggested today that 8 years would be an appropriate term limit for a congressman or congresswoman, and it's certainly, 8 to 10 years is as much as any of them should have before resting for at least one cycle and letting someone else take a turn.